No stopwatch there, but I'll assume that's around 30 seconds. Just for those that have just joined, I'm Tim from the Australian Space Agency's International and National Engagement team. I'd just like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. The Adelaide team are currently on Kaurna land and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. And welcome to the Australian Space Agency's launch of the first of three-stage $150 million Moon to Mars program. Today we'll be going through the recently launched Supply Chain Capability Program. And just to note, the session today will be recorded and distributed on various digital agency platforms. This session will be approximately 30 minutes, which will be opened shortly by Campbell Pegg, and he is the project lead of the Moon to Mars program. In a moment, we'll also welcome Rebecca Custer from the team for an explanation of the program. And we'll finish with a couple of questions from the audience today, which can be submitted by typing in the chat options available in WebEx, which hopefully you found. And noting that we have around 30 minutes today, if we don't get to your question, we'll also have frequently asked questions document, a contact phone number and a web link to help you find the grant guidelines available at the end of the presentation. And now I'd like to welcome Campbell Pegg to the virtual stage. Over to you, Campbell.
Thank you very much, Tim, and I'm glad to be here. So as Tim said, he is the lead for the Moon to Mars initiative for the engagement team here. And we also have online Rebecca Custer, who is the project manager for the supply chain program. So today I wanted to give you a little bit more context before we start in the supply chain program, a little bit about the Moon to Mars initiative itself, and then I'll pass the microphone over to Rebecca to continue on. So as most of you would know, we have $150 million invested by the Australian government to grow Australian businesses here in Australia so they can succeed in international and national supply chains and also support NASA's endeavours to go back to the moon and onto Mars. The next slide, please. So how we've broken this program up is into three different programs. And one is the supply chain program, the other is the demonstrator program, and the third is the Trailblazer program. We've roughly assigned about equally amount of money for each of these programs. The first one, we had the supply chain program, which you'll hear a lot more about today. And this is really about getting Australian companies into those national and international supply chains. At the end of this program, we really want to see a range of contracts signed in the Australian industry. In the demonstrator project program itself, this is a program about getting a lot of Australian hardware and software and services into space and kickstarting that Australian industry and really give us that heritage that we need. And the very last one is the Trailblazer program. This program is a major project, an Australian major project that is supporting NASA's Moon to Mars activities. And this is going to be sort of a cornerstone project that is aiming to inspire Australia and really demonstrate to the world what we can do. We go to the next slide. So to put this all together, the main objectives of this initiative are written here on the screen, but the key ones that I really want to emphasise today is that we're here to support Australia's ambitions to join NASA's endeavours to go to Moon and onto Mars. But we also want to reach those employment and economic targets that we've set ourselves. We definitely want to build that capability and capacity inside the Australian industry, and then also demonstrate that capability and capacity to the world of what we can do. We at the same time want to lift Australian companies' involvement in national and international supply chains and at the same time inspire the nation. So this is, in the broad sense, this is what the Moon to Mars initiative is about, and we at later times throughout the year and next year will be releasing certain assets of this program off. But today is purely about the supply chain program, and I'll pass the microphone over to Rebecca, who will continue on as the program manager for the supply chain program. Thank you, Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Campbell. Today is really all about helping you guys understand their capability program, and we're going to give an overview of the program with a fair bit of detail, hopefully, of what's in the opportunity guidelines for you. So we'll be covering the objectives, the outcomes, who can apply, the eligible activities, a little bit of detail on timeframes and the assessment process. And then, as Tim mentioned, towards the end, we'll point you towards where you can find some more information to help you put together the best applications you possibly can. And we'll have some time to answer questions. So, supply chain, similarly to the initiative, it is also divided into 3 components, only 2 of which are funded. So the concurrent activities are the kind of activities that Tim and the engagement and international engagement team are doing, looking at where we can align with other programs and some of the international agreement work. The facilitation component of the supply chain program is still being scoped, so watch this space. There'll be more to come on that front later. And today it's about the capability grants. So we're pretty excited when the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, Karen Andrews, launched the program on the 27th of August recently. It is a 5-year program, so we've got $25.7 million over the 5 years of the program, and it's an open program. So what that means is that it's open now and you can apply at this point in time, anytime up until the 30th of June 2023. So we are looking at having intakes 3 to 4 times per year. If you look on the business.gov.au website, you will find an FAQ document which publishes the intake dates. So at the moment, we're looking to have the first intake in mid-October, another one in December, and one in May. So it's certainly not a one-shot opportunity. As you can see, we are doing intakes multiple times per year, but we do encourage you to put your best foot forward, take your time, get your applications ready to give yourself the best chance of success. So the minimum grant size is $250,000. The maximum grant is $1 million. And the opportunity is really targeted at Australian businesses with a demonstrated national or international supply chain opportunity. So it's quite commercially focused, and that's done on purpose. So looking at the objectives and the outcomes, if you take one thing away from this slide, we want you to understand that this grant opportunity guideline is about, or the grant opportunity program, sorry, is about lifting the overall capability and capacity of the Australian space industry. So underneath that objective, we do want to be able to have the Australian industry better able to support NASA's endeavours to go to the moon and onto Mars. We want to grow the participation of Australian companies in domestic and international supply chains, and overall grow the skills, capability and capacity of the Australian industry. So it's really that overall uplift of the industry as a starting point for the program under the initiative. The outcomes over on the right-hand side, as Campbell said, if you guys can get contracts, more business, more sales, we are happy. We feel that that will have, we've achieved some of our aims if that's the case. Together with that, so hand in hand with you guys getting contracts and sales, is the increased skills, experience, employment within the industry, and the increased capabilities and capacities. So moving on, who can apply? The question on all of your lips, I'm sure. So to be eligible, you must be an entity incorporated in Australia. So given that it is quite a commercially focused program, we think it's reasonable that people are in a business setting. They need to be able to take advantage of those supply chain opportunities that they may have. You must also have a supply chain opportunity with buyer support. So if you read the guidelines, you will see that we are seeking people to have either letters of intent, potential sales, some support from your buyer or customer to help you take advantage of a supply chain opportunity. There's also a co-funding requirement of at least 25%. Now, most of the similar government programs have equal co-funding contribution requirements. So in this case, it's a bit less, and that's because we've recognised the COVID environment is impacting people out there and businesses at the moment, and also as a response to the Moon to Mars consultation feedback that we did earlier this year. Now, even though we do have an eligibility requirement for an entity incorporated in Australia, we are strongly encouraging teaming between industry and research organisations. So if you can hook yourself up with a smart researcher or an academic who can help you improve your product process or capability to take advantage of a supply chain opportunity, do that. It will be well considered. We do strongly encourage teaming, joint application. Well, if you team, you have to have a clear leader in your application, but teaming within applications is encouraged. And again, the clear commercialisation pathway is expected. On to eligible activities. So to be eligible, the projects must align with the priorities in the Australian Civil Space Strategy. So if you pop on over to the agency's website, you can find a copy of our strategy that outlines the civil space priority areas, or SPAs, that the agency is focusing on. So it's worth your while to take a look at that. Your project also has to be aimed at accessing an identified domestic and/or international supply chain opportunity. So you might be picking up that there's a bit of a theme here, and have the ability to support the Moon to Mars activities. So over onto the right-hand side, a bit more specifically, the eligible activities are quite broad. So in terms of capital equipment, you can, lease, install, commission. You can use the grant money to also help with, say, cyber security or other specialist software, the purchase of that. The grant money can be used to help build your organisational capacity to support the engagement in the supply chain. The point here on non-recurring engineering, what that really is about is that we don't want to be doing ongoing or early stage product development. If you have a supply chain opportunity, it's expected that your product, process or service is quite mature. So yes, we will certainly consider some one-off engineering or improvement to help you take advantage of that supply chain opportunity, but early stage research that doesn't have a clear commercialisation pathway or product development that doesn't directly support a supply chain opportunity, they're probably not going to be accepted or as competitive. Engineering and commissioning activities are certainly one of the eligible activities, and workforce training and accreditation. So that's all in line with the lifting that capability and capacity in industry. So some examples. You may have seen a similar slide to this in the Moon to Mars consultations earlier this year. We will certainly consider transfers from adjacent industries. So if you have a mature product in another industry, so say defence or mining, for instance, that you think can pivot across to the space industry, that would be a scenario that would be considered. I mentioned before the cybersecurity capability training or purchase of software. And scenario 3 talks about tooling process improvement for reliability. So with this one, you've got a product and it's at a certain stage and you need to get it from A to B, and you know that you need to either improve the reliability, you might need to change the material, and you've tested and you know that it's going to meet or help you to meet that supply chain opportunity if you can get a piece of machining in to do that, or a new machine to increase your production because you need to be able to have a higher throughput to meet your supply chain, then that is what this program is about. Now, a little bit on assessment. There are 3 merit criteria in the guidelines, and they are based around the 3 bullet points in front of you. So the first one really centres around that business case. So how are you going to how will your project or your application grow the skills, capability and capacity of your business to participate in that international and or domestic supply chain? Now, with that first one, the strength of your supply chain opportunity is going to be key. If you read the guidelines, there's a lot more detail against each of these criteria, so I do encourage that you go take a look. But that's what the first one is about. The second one is all about the project plan. How are you going to deliver it? Do you have experience doing similar projects? How are you going to meet, your project management triangle of on time to scope and cost? So how is your business's capacity and capability positioned to deliver the project that you have applied for the funding for? And finally, what impact will that grant funding have for your business, for your ability to take advantage of that supply chain opportunity? So across all three of those, again, I'll just reiterate the strength of the opportunity that the grant will help you take advantage of is a key consideration. So a little bit on timing. In general, we are hoping that from the end of intake through to announcement is no more than about 4 months. Do note that the first intake is over the Christmas period, which is does have an impact on the timings for that one. Another key thing to take notice of here is that you can apply multiple times. So it's not as though it's a one-shot hit. The team over at business.gov.au can provide feedback to unsuccessful applicants, and you will see some words in the guidelines that tell you that you are able to then, modify, improve your application, address that feedback to apply again. But note that the timing of the intakes means that you won't be able to apply and take into account any feedback on successive intakes. That's just the way that it works out. If you apply once, you're unsuccessful, you get feedback, it'll be at least not the following, but the intake after that, before you'll have that feedback in hand to be able to improve your application. But by all means, the opportunity is here for you to take advantage of. We want industry to succeed. We want you to put your best foot forward. I would encourage that people go do their homework, line up their buyers, get their teaming in place, really understand your business case and give yourself the best chance of success when you apply. So this slide here is a bit busy. You can see the funding profile along the top, and you can see also that the applications are open for quite some time. The stars indicate the 3 to 4 times per year intake, and we've got a reminder on the eligibility activity over on the right. But if you take a look at how the box at the top has been expanded out towards the bottom, the process really is that we have the application open, which it is now. Thank you very much to the Minister. The grant application closes, and they are those intake close dates that I mentioned in the FAQ document on the business.gov.au website. The grants then will be assessed. We'll go through the selection process, and we've got the usual negotiations and approvals that have to happen before money can be released. But it is looking to be 3 to 6 months from the close date through to the release of the funding. So that covers most of the key points from the guidelines, but we do want to make sure that you're aware of where you can find more information. So pop on over to business.gov.au. We've got the specific URL there. You'll find the grant guidelines. I do strongly recommend that you read the detail in them. And the FAQ document is my hot tip as well. It's got some very useful information in there. There's also some sample documentation, a copy of the standard agreement. I would also encourage people to take a look at that. There isn't a lot of flexibility on the agreement, so best to understand and make sure that you can work with that upfront, and some budget and letter templates. Over on the Space Agency website at space.gov.au, there's the Australian Civil Space Strategy that I mentioned, which outlines the priorities for the agency, our strategy, and those strategic priority areas. And we've also got some more information on the Moon to Mars initiative website, which has its own page within our site. So certainly take a look at that as well. So that concludes the us talking part of the presentation. I'll just see whether Tim has got some questions that have come through that we can help you guys out with any questions you may have.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few questions through, so thank you. Feel free to put your questions just in the WebEx chat. We'll get to as many as we can. If we can't get to them today, we'll try and answer them at another time and get back to you. One of the questions that I've just received, does the 25% co-contribution include in-kind support for a proposal, Rebecca?
No, it doesn't. So it does have to be cash, but I will hand over to Eleonora. We have Eleonora online from the Business Grants Hub, and she can tell you all about the ins and outs of cash contributions.
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. Yes, your contribution must be cash. You can include in-kind as part of your project, and that will go to merit, but it won't be considered as part of that 25% contribution. There's another question while I'm here. How will feedback be provided? That'll be verbal. We don't provide written feedback.
Yeah, great questions here. I like it because it's so keen. Can you have 2 successful applications?
That is a good question. Eleonora, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would need to be on 2 different projects.
Yeah, so you could apply and receive funding twice as long as it was for 2 different supply chain opportunities. We wouldn't fund the same opportunity twice over the period of the program.
Excellent. Thanks, Eleonora. And perhaps this is a question for Campbell. What TRL level are you looking at with the program?
Thank you, Tim. So in the guidelines, it clearly states that anything 4 and below will not be funded. But just in the context of actually the program itself, it's clear that we're aiming for things that are at a very high TRL already. We understand things aren't in space now, that's fine, but at the same time we're looking for things that are getting into the supply chain. So through this program, we don't have a huge amount of money or time for a major technological updates during this program itself. There are other programs that will be doing this, but this one is really about making that supply opportunity happen.
Well, thanks, Campbell. Another question here. I think we did touch on this, Rebecca, but can academic institutions take part in the Moon to Mars Capability Grant Program?
Usually it wouldn't be unless they can team with a commercial business partner. So you do have to meet the eligibility criteria of being an incorporated entity. If there is if you're an academic institution and you have a supply chain opportunity and a customer, then you'd need to meet those eligibility criteria. So again, the program isn't designed to support early research and development. It would need to be quite a mature opportunity, and you'd need to be most likely teamed with someone who's an incorporated entity to have that buyer support lined up. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Eleonora?
Sorry, no, that's fine. We've covered it.
Great.
There's a couple of questions coming in about the contribution to the grant. Are salaries considered to be cash? please have a look at the frequently asked questions. This information is set out there, but essentially we consider a contribution to be cash if there's been a financial transaction from one party to another. So if an employer has paid a salary to a person, then we consider that to be cash. So for existing employees. There's another question here, is it acceptable to use the grant to hire a new employee? Yes, it is. Is it acceptable to allocate new hires to a market wage in the project budget? The eligible expenditure guidelines at the back of the program guidelines set out the levels of salary that are allowable under the program, and that includes a maximum of 175,000. So please make sure you're familiar with the eligibility guidelines when you're putting together your budget.
Well, thanks, Eleonora. Another question that we've got in here, how long will the applications typically take to process once received? Eleonora?
I think, as Rebecca mentioned in the presentation, it'll be around 4 months. We're aiming from the intake date to when you'll receive a decision. And the first assessment period will be over Christmas, so there will be, times when there's a couple of weeks difference in that timing.
Yeah, and I can add to that, we are looking as the program progresses to try and improve wherever we possibly can. So we may be able to improve those timelines as the program progresses and matures and people become more familiar with the processes.
We've just received another question about will a list be published of all of the companies that are applying for grants? And perhaps a little bit about privacy, Eleonora, and how that process works.
Yeah, so we don't, at the announcement of grants, we publish who's successful, but we don't publish details of all applicants, obviously for privacy reasons. I understand people are probably interested in that information, but it's not something that we can publish.
Excellent. And can companies, I think Rebecca touched on this, but we've got people joining at different times, I guess. Can I team up with a second business or organisation and submit a joint application?
We certainly encourage teaming, but there has to be a clearly identified lead in the partnership. So the government can only sign a contract with one entity, which would be that lead entity. But certainly underneath that application, we do encourage partnerships. So it's something that we are quite keen on, and it will be looked on very favourably for people to team up and make sure that they've got the best of the best in their team to help them put their best foot forward.
Rebecca, just on the funding profile, how much will be available in the first 12 months of the program? I assume that would be the financial year.
Yes, so the first year there is a small amount of only 1.7 million. That funding profile ramps up. There's 3 million in the second financial year of the program and then 7 million for each of the 3 latter years. So again, do take your time, put your best foot forward. The funding profile gives you that time to help get your partnerships organised and your buyer support, and it's certainly, you're not going to miss out if you don't get in the first intake.
Thanks, Rebecca. And we're getting quite a few questions just about how to team up, how to work with other companies. Perhaps, Rebecca, could you go through the next stage of the supply chain program, the facilitation program that's in design at the moment?
Yes, it is in design. So we don't have anything that's been approved or agreed in full, but we are doing some consultations. We are talking to aligned or similar programs such as entrepreneurs, the accelerating commercialisation, CDIC. We're trying to get out there and talk to as many people as we can to design that program. But really, it's what we're aiming to do is address the feedback that we received from the Moon to Mars consultation feedback. So there was a lot of feedback in the Moon to Mars consultation that said the industry is very keen to highlight the capability of the Australian industry, where our strengths are, to get education on how other people have successfully cracked the nut, if you would like. So we really have that feedback in mind, so front and centre when we are trying to put forward options of how we can deliver that facilitation program. But do be assured, the facilitation program is all about helping you guys get those connections, the networking. We can't tell you the detail yet, but we're working on it.
Chuck you a curly one there, Rebecca. And another question just here related, what is the buyer support? Can we have an example of what buyer support is?
Yep. So again, I will point you to your FAQ document, but it does talk in there about some examples of buyer support being a letter of intent, making that argument for a clear path to contracts or increased sales. We do understand that it's probably unreasonable for people to have a contract in place. That would be ideal. Very good buyer support if one has a contract with their buyer. But certainly what that path is to get from where you currently are to where you'll be able to take advantage of that opportunity. And we will be reviewing that as the program progresses. So as we get the intakes in, we'll look at the buyer support and, you know, talk to people in the industry as well. So that will be, you know, reviewed and considered as the program progresses.
Rebecca, and one more question. Can team partnerships share the contribution, the 25% contribution?
I believe they would be able to, but Eleonora, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're the applicant and you've got partners, that 25% can come from from yourself or from yourself and a mix of those partners or from a partner. We're not fussed about where it comes from. It needs to be confirmed, obviously, so that's all we're worried about. That there's a commitment to provide that money from someone associated with your project.
Excellent. Thanks, Eleonora. I'm just conscious of time. We're now at 2:05 Adelaide time, 2:35 Eastern. So, look, I'd really like to thank everyone for coming today. We look forward to receiving your applications and working with you to grow the Australian space industry. Further information is available now from business.gov.au or by calling the grant hotline on 13 28 46. That number again is 13 28 46 for all of your unanswered questions. And a recording of the presentation will be available on the agency YouTube and our social media pages. So hopefully if you missed anything from today or you have some colleagues, please direct them to the agency social media. Thanks for your time today and good luck with your applications. We really look forward to working with you. Thank you.